Welcome back, everybody. I'm Allie from Heart and Soul Connected, and welcome back to this pre-recorded part 2 video of the Generation Jones era and what was produced and who was living in that time period. For many years, I had identified myself as a baby boomer, even though there were parts of baby boomer generation that did not totally resonate with me, much like there's a lot of the Generation X or the next generations that don't always resonate with the people and what it is that they grew up with and how they felt about it. My brother was definitely right in there in a generation of baby boomers born in 1946. My other brother as well, and introduced me to Bandstand and had me dancing with him when I was 5 years old. So music was something that I grew up with immediately, and not just rock and roll, but all kinds of music, big bands music, piano music, classical music. So it was only natural that music became that part of my identity. And I'm sure there are many other people, not just Generation Jones people, but people who identify very, very intricately with the music that they heard from their time of probably junior high school at the very least, through college and beyond. For me, it was in 1969, I believe. I was in high school and I was in the 9th grade, and I would not have been able to go to Woodstock, and my mother wouldn't have let me go anyway. I was 14. And so while I did a lot of things that probably a lot of people at 14 these days didn't do, with regard to work and other things, all I can say is I remember about Woodstock, but not that I was there. I do, however, have friends who were there, and their memory is very different. Depending on what it is they remember. And there were a lot of huge musical attractions there that stayed with me over time, even though I was not in attendance there. So by the time I graduated from high school in 1973, I am deeply, deeply, deeply embedded in music. So the 70s completely and the 80s completely took me by storm and brought me the most intricate memories I can ever have of my lifetime. There are a lot of people, and I also remember a lot of the movies that were out, the cultural changes, and where I was when Watergate was announced, and where I was when this happened and that happened. But it's the music that stays with me, and that's what I would like to talk about today. It is an epiphany for me because I am so deeply tied to the music that I can sing most lyrics to most songs that came out probably between 1968 and 1985, 86, 87. And I remember where I was, I remember what I was doing, and actually have an experience of what I call mind time travel for every single one of those songs. I remember how it affected me. The emotions come back to me. It's an incredibly powerful memory. And I'm finding more people in this generation have the same thing. So I asked the question, what is it about the shaping of the music of Generation Jones people? And I got a very interesting answer, and that is that it was a uniquely broad and diverse range of genres and artists. And later, of course, in the music that came out, it moved out of just listening to it on the radio and now watching it either on MTV or other music stations that created this sense of understanding the story behind it, even though it was just a made-up story. For instance, Oh Sherry, I remember Steve Perry singing that and how beautiful it was. But then I watched the video of it, and he's waiting in this castle, and it goes on, and it's so exciting. It's a story behind the pictures. And Aha did it, and Tears for Fears did it, and so many others. Queen did it. I did just the whole gamut of people and how they presented their music in a differing form. And that's what's behind the Radio Gaga that Queen sings. It's like you know, we love the radio, but now we're going to be feasting. Our eyes are going to be feasting, but we shouldn't give up radio, because radio right now may seem like gaga or caca is what it was supposed to be, but it's not. It's just that everybody's focusing more over here on those music videos that were happening, and perhaps the concerts that people were attending, because they became more widespread and they came to colleges. I remember some guy named Bruce Springsteen and Jackson Browne, another guy, I didn't know who they were, came to my college in the 70s. And of course we went not knowing that these people would later be such an influential part of not only our lives, but of the culture. So many of us grew up listening to the music of older siblings if we had them. And for me, mine were already out of the house by the time I was in high school. So I did have the earlier influence by my older brother, but everything else was influenced by myself. It was listening to WRKO AM radio in Boston, or WAAF alternative music down in Boston, and later Casey Kasem and many, many other things that were happening at the time, and waiting the last day of the year to listen to all the top songs of that year to find out what the number one song was and how it repeated itself over the weekend or over the time of New Year. And we would look forward to it. We'd be, you know, it'd be 3 a.m. and our eyes are just slits and we're, oh, I gotta stay awake so I can find out what the song is. I usually started though at about probably 30 and under, so because 100 songs was always the hardest to get through on that whole weekend. So we caught the cultural wave in our time period. We became 14-year-olds, let's say, if you were born in 54, you would have been 15. And some of the others, you know, if it was the people that were born in 1965, you would have been early 80s, let's say, and you would have been more of an adult at that time. So this was sort of that generation that, and then there was always music that went with the movies that we watched. You know, Top Gun had songs. This one had the, what is it? Breakfast Club had an album. All of them had albums. They were just like, oh, I got to get the album for that. Grease and all the songs that came out. We would put them on and listen to them all the time. And then from albums, we had them on cassettes and from or 8-tracks. And from there, we eventually listened to them now on some of the stations on Sirius. I remember just buying monthly subscription to the 80s on Sirius. I only wanted to listen to 80s music for a long period of time because it made me happy. Now I was in my 30s then, but it didn't matter. I loved the 80s music. So we had an eclectic 1970s. We had rock and roll. We had a little bit of, and I may leave out some stuff, so this isn't all inclusive. I'm doing the best I can. We may have had some, of course, R&B. We had some disco, which a lot of people didn't like. We had Motown. We had funk. We had funkadelic music. We just had all kinds of music in the 70s. As teenagers, we experienced an unprecedented explosion of musical variety. And here's a few. Bands like Led Zeppelin and Pink Floyd moved away from single-focused hits to create entire albums that were works of art. In my case, it was Jethro Tull, Thick as a Brick. The whole thing was a work of art. We had The Who, Tommy. We had so many others. We had disco that was polarizing. A lot of people did not like it. They say, everybody said, oh, disco sucks and everything. But it did generate a lot of publicity. There were movies made around it, like Saturday Night Fever. And we loved the songs that came from them, some of them love songs. And then we had some real funkadelic stuff from that generation. We had Discotheque and the Sexualettes. Get dancing, I mean, it was fun. It was a fun time. I know Studio 54 came out then, and with all of the things that were told about Studio 54, in which a lot of the boomers attended, by the way, but so did some of the Gen Xers. So that we Gen Joneses were there. A huge mix of genres also. We had glam rock, David Bowie with all his makeup and his space oddity stuff. We had punk, the Ramones and the Clash. We had new wave like Elvis Costello and the Pretenders. We had folk, we had reggae, and we had other things. So numerous that I have to sit here and count them all off. There's just so many different songs. So the MTV era of the 80s, Joneses were present for the dawn of MTV, which revolutionized the music industry. The visual medium catapulted Michael Jackson, Madonna, and Prince into global superstardom. It did. It just did. I'm sure it did a lot of other bands as well. There's a lot right there. REO Speedwagon. A lot of these that I remember from the time period and how they influenced my life. We also had what the Logical song come out. We just had so many songs, and we also gave a generation a soundtrack that was both audio and visual. So how could we not remember what we were doing, where we were, and how we were enjoying it at the time? Because once it comes on, we have those memories in our mind altogether. We may not remember exactly where we were, but there also are iterations of songs with different artists that bring us a different type of message depending on who sings them. MacArthur's Park, first done by Richard Harris in the 60s, was very dramatic, and MacArthur's Park is melting in the dark, and someone let the it's a ballad. It's a ballad. But Donna Summer came out, she jazzed it all up, and instead of playing checkers, she played Chinese checkers. And Donna Summer made one of the most popular disco albums of the time. She was a disco queen, and she may not have been loved by everybody, but she worked hard for the money, if you know what I mean. Yeah. Music as a memory anchor for us Joneses are songs from our period of time that we were growing up as teenagers into young adulthood that are tied to our personal memories and our moments in living. Listening to a particular track can trigger a vivid flashback all the time, especially if you're a visual person. I will find that I have to be extremely careful because some of those memories are too melancholy for me to relive at certain times. And I know that during times of Mercury retrogrades, I tend to go back and look at them. Just like I look at old pictures, just like I watch old movies, just like I look at old television advertisements that are listed on YouTube. There's something about seeing Mikey not want to eat eating his life cereal that just makes me feel like I'm at home again. I'm almost traveling through time without my body being there, but my mind floating. How did this shape our generational identity? I think it shaped mine incredibly, in an incredibly large way. I have a very dear friend who feels the same way. She recognizes as years go by just exactly how fast time is going by and where are we on that time ladder. What I really love too is that many of us that were in Generation Jones, we will listen to music from the 90s, the 2000s, the 2010s, and the 2020s. And it's only because we love music so much. And perhaps this can anchor us into remembering things like this in our own time period with our own children, with our own grandchildren, or our friends. If we have younger friends, they keep us younger. For instance, I know Coldplay has been around for a number of years, and all of their songs hold great meaning for me. The ones that I know bring me back to the times and the memories that I have of them. And sometimes when I'm feeling incredibly sad, I actually want to feel sad. I thought that may sound silly, but it really is it's a resurrection of a time gone by that we were possible. It was possible for us to see. And we had Vietnam, but that was more the boomers, because by 72, we were out of there. We may have been in other altercations and situations, but we were out of that Vietnam syndrome, I guess. And the problem with it is the boomers did not feel well received coming back from that. But our generation, we stood up for ourselves, but we didn't have to protest as much from the generation right behind us. They were the movers and the shakers. Some of us progressed as being knowledgeable in certain areas in order to create a better life for ourselves. That's why I consider myself sort of a mutt. I became a humanities professor because I like so many different things that I can't just pick one. So I have that in my repertoire. That's my music, that's my films, that's my friends, that's my life. And I'm not alone in that, but it doesn't mean you have to be that way either. It depends on the circumstances. I have another friend whose husband never listened to music, was not allowed to, or wasn't interested. He has a very different perspective on what that time period is like. So for those of us who have this perspective, it's almost like I wish I could just put all the music in a kaleidoscope and I could pick what I wanted and put it all together and make what my mind says is important and what time says is important for me to review again. I've done that before on road trips, though. I've put a whole package of songs together and over the term of the road trip, listened to every single one of them that brought me joy from other time periods. And I remade memories as well, because now when I hear them, I can remember when I heard them. I can remember how I felt about how I heard them. And I can remember how I feel about them now and what they mean to me and how important they were to me. They are the poetry of our generation. They coexist in our minds in many, many ways. Mirroring our diverse world, many of these songs, I mean, they talked about all the things we were going through at the time. Even in the 90s, when Bryan Adams sang The Summer of '69, I had a different meaning in my life, but I also remember the summer the song came out and how important it was to me. I remember Billy Joel's song, We Didn't Start the Fire, and all the things that had happened that I remembered so clearly in my life as a Generation Jones, and the song and how important it became to me. A wide array of musical styles reflects the generation, our generational identity as Jonesers. We were idealistic in the 60s. We hit the hard reality of the 70s. And by the time the 80s came and we were in the midst of so much mess and greed and power hungry and governmental strife and the extreme in our looks, our hair, our clothes, and so on. All those things had an influence on us and also showed up in the films of the time period. If you want to understand a time period, you look at the films of the day. Some of my favorite films being John Candy, Steve Martin, and some of those folks, and my own children watching them and having them important to them in a different way. We defined ourselves in a new era. We engaged with new genres. We helped ourselves forge an identity that was distinct, a little more distinct than the older boomers were. While the boomers embraced the hippie movement, Jonesers found their musical home in edgier, more pragmatic sounds. Led Zeppelin, perfect example of something like that. And I know there are other bands, hair bands, metal bands, that a lot of people that were younger than I were, and they grew up and enjoyed those a great deal. Van Halen and a lot of others that were there. The term jonesing refers to a powerful craving for something. In music, it's reflected more so in Generation Jonesers than in any definitive song. We have our own definitive songs that we love. It echoes the longing for a more optimistic future for our children and for our grandchildren, and a more optimistic future than our older siblings experienced. Mine went into the service, mine went to the war, mine had to scrape and make it in their lives with a very bad economy. We wanted more than that. And then we became what many people would say, maybe greedy, but I would say no. We just said, we're not going we're going to do something about what we want. We want to make what we want. And this is why many of us as young women went back to college or went to college at all and became more than just the housewife and mother. We wanted to be more than that. There was more out there in the world, and we were excited to see it. We already saw it in the songs that were being played on MTV. We were resilient and adaptable. This is a generational good point. Not every Jen Jones will be resilient and adaptable, but as a generation, we can say that it is more adaptable. The music speaks to our adaptability. We went from cassettes and radio to the MTV revolution, and we had to go through Spotify, and we had to go through CD players and walk as we're walking, and now we have the digital music. We've been through it all. Each time adapting to that new thing. We bought this one, and then it's like a VCR we bought. We bought a Betamax. It was $800, and then a VCR came out, and it was $400, and then a better one, and then a DVD player, and the PlayStations and everything that our children ended up with. It's a growth on that sort of an economy. The mirror we had shifts our ability to navigate significant shifts in technology and society in our lifetime. A little caveat here for adaptability. I only started teaching at the college level when I was 44 years old. And I'd only been doing computer work probably for about 4 or 5 years, learning the computer. I could type, but and in 2005, had to learn how to teach online. And so many in my class that were boomers were very upset about it. It's like, I can't learn how to teach this. This is too difficult for me. This is hard. This is not me. This is fake, and so on and so forth. I learned how to do it, and I'm so glad I did, because I continue to do it at my age. I'm not real hepped up about the AI and how I have to integrate that. And I guess that's just showing that at this point I've been stable. My stability and adaptability is sort of wavering, but not to music, not at all. Finally, I'd like to say, let's see, I want to make sure I get all the points because they're so important. The music that we were around, that we heard, that we played, that we loved, that we bought, that we played even when there were jukeboxes and Pizza Hut and so on, were experienced as a rich tapestry of personal moments, relationships, and cultural shifts, leading to a unique emotional response to us later in life. And that is why so many of us resonate, and those of us in the psychic field get song lyrics as answers to questions, because it fits that so perfectly that it just simply comes through and arrives. It arrives in our memory. And it reminds us of the symbology of the time, or the symbology, and the answer might come from that. Listening to the era's music can trigger a strong emotional response to our younger selves, reinforcing the Jones effect of feeling connected to, and yet certainly not still part of, those times. But that's what keeps us young. That's what keeps us young. And I love that. So if you're a Joneser, welcome. If you're not, it's okay. You can still be this person. It's just that I wanted an explanation that told me why it was so important. And I found that this understanding of the cultural shifts and the beauty of, and a lot of artists were boomers. I'm not saying they were all Jonesers, but the music they made for us, right here to the heart. Thank you very much. I hope you have a beautiful day. Bye-bye.